What I'm about to tell you is going to benefit you immensely when buying your next piece of land. It's going to save you a ton of money and even more stress, so let's get into it. Before we get too far into things, my name's Margaret. My dad, Michael, and I make videos to educate you about buying and selling real estate. If you have any questions, feel free to use this as a resource. We also have some free downloadable resources down below for you to use as well. All right, so number one, you're going to want to walk the land. You need to know what the terrain of the parcel of land you're buying actually looks like. You need to know what the boundaries look like. You need to know kind of where your abutters are at, if they think their property line is a certain place and you think it's somewhere else. But even more importantly than just walking the terrain and really getting a feel for what it looks like or feels like, you absolutely have to walk the property after it's rained. So why are we doing this? We're doing this because you need to know where water's accumulating. Sometimes the flood maps, the FEMA flood maps, aren't always entirely accurate. So you're going to want to walk the property and figure out, is it flooding in certain areas? Are there wetlands that we didn't previously know about? It's good information to have, and it's absolutely going to make a huge impact on whether or not you're able to build on the land or where you're able to build on the land in general. All right, so number two, you're going to want to look at comparable properties in the area, or even better, if you're working with a real estate agent, we can prepare a CMA for you. So what we're going to do is basically look at neighboring properties and tell you what we think your home could potentially sell for based on a million different factors, right? So if you're not working with a real estate agent already, you can certainly go on, Zillow or realtor.com and look at comparable homes and see what they've sold for, or comparable properties rather, and see what they've sold for, and figure out, if your property's similar enough, could you also get that value for your land? You yourself could go on Zillow or realtor.com and figure out what similar properties have previously sold for, and figure out if you're paying truly the right price for the land that you're looking at. Oftentimes, people think that their properties are worth more than they're really worth, and they'll try and list them for, way over potentially market value. As real estate agents, while we can give people our opinions as to what we think their house could sell for based on, what others in the area have recently sold for that are similar, at the end of the day, our clients can list for whatever they want to list for. And if they want to list their home that might be valued at $250,000 for $1 million, they can certainly do so. So in order to avoid overpaying for the land you're looking at, you absolutely have to look at comparable properties in the area. All right, and number three, you're gonna wanna have the land surveyed. Now, if somebody's listed their property on the market, there's already a fair chance they've had a survey done, but if they haven't, this is super important. And when you're having a land surveyed, you basically can pay for different services, right? So there's a boundary survey, there's an elevation survey, terrain survey, all of which are important. The most common would probably be just a regular boundary survey. And why is this important? Well, it's important because oftentimes when you're buying real estate, people think that their boundary is somewhere where it's not actually, and you'll have abutters of your property or neighbors trying to basically claim that the land is theirs and really it might be yours, or the previous owner of the land you're looking at thinks it's theirs and it's really the neighbors, right? So it's really important to have this clearly outlined right when you buy the real estate. That way you don't come up with issues, or you don't find issues later on down the road. You can just kind of nip it in the butt before the sale even closes. As far as an elevation survey, or the elevation aspect of things, this is also important to know if you're in a flood zone. You can also look at the FEMA flood maps, but it's good to know kind of the elevation of your property, know where you're at in comparison to sea level. And then as far as terrain goes, that's going to be kind of the dips and peaks in the parcel of real estate that you're looking at, right? Like all of the hills and bumps and cliffs that are there, so that you know exactly what the real estate or that particular parcel looks like. And number four, restricted covenants in the deeds. This is, all of these are important, but arguably one of the most important things, something that can really throw people for a loop, right? So as many people know, there can be restricted covenants in your deed. Just because you're buying the piece of real estate doesn't always mean you can do whatever you want with it, even though we think that we can. So what's a good example of this? Well, an easement. Let's say your neighbor's driveway cuts across your land. So they have an easement to use their driveway on your land, right? That's, not super uncommon to see. So what is a less common example, right? So let's say we have a seller they own two pieces of real estate right next to each other. So they own their house that they're currently living in on one parcel, and then right next to it is going to be an empty lot, okay? They're selling that empty lot to potentially you, but they put in a restricted covenant in your deed that says, well, they have a view of the water, a very small view of the water, right? So they put a restricted covenant in your deed that even though the town allows you to build 30 feet up, you're only allowed to build 15 to 20 because, or, you know, they'll give an exact number, let's say 15 feet, because they don't want to basically disturb their view of the water. So even though you're buying this piece of real estate, if they write it into the deed, it's a done deal pretty much, right? So you now won't be able to build a second floor to your home, and you then won't really get your water view because you potentially have to be so many feet up in the air, right? So now your neighbor gets to keep, the seller gets to keep their water view, and you don't get that, and you can't build anything bigger than, say, a ranch, right? People can also put in restricted covenants and deeds saying you can't have trees that are a certain height. You can't use the land commercially, even if it's zoned to potentially be used for commercial use. You can't store boats on your property. There's a million different things that people can put into deeds, and it can really throw people for a loop. Generally speaking, it's really exciting when deeds look really simplified, when there's not really any or many restricted covenants or easements in a deed. It's a lot more exciting than it seems. But yeah, so basically a restricted covenant, an easement, it's really not a big deal, but it's definitely something to look out for and keep an eye out for when you're looking to invest in real estate and land in general. And number 5, you are going to want to talk to the neighbors. Now, why do we tell people to do this? And some people are a little bit hesitant to do this, but it's incredibly important to talk to the neighbors, because oftentimes if you're moving in next door, they want to know who's moving in next door, right? And oftentimes neighbors are a lot more willing to talk about things than people really realize. And so when you speak to the neighbors, they're going to tell you, hey, you know, this neighbor's not that friendly, or this is what the deal was with the land before you were looking at it. You know, they can just tell you things about the area. If you're unfamiliar with the area, they can tell you things about the real estate that you're looking at. And they can be an immense resource that people don't always think to ask them or to speak to them, or it can be uncomfortable to kind of go up to their door and talk to them. But at the end of the day, they can be incredibly insightful, and I would say it's kind of necessary when you're buying real estate to talk to the neighbors, even though a lot of people don't think of it. So those were the 5 mistakes people make when they're buying land. I hope you found this video helpful, and again, my name's Margaret. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. All of our information is down below, as well as some free downloadable resources for you to use as well, and we'll see you next time.